Thank you. I call Michelle Ballantyne to be followed by Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today's debate on waiting times isn't a new issue. Back in 2006, Audit Scotland reported that the NHS in Scotland had made significant progress in reducing waiting times. However, some of this had been achieved by using the Golden Jubilee National Hospital, private providers and waiting times initiatives, all of which had been at relatively high cost. Evidence suggested that short-term increases in activity at particular points in the system did not lead to sustained reductions in waiting times. Despite this knowledge, in 2011, the government brought forward the Patients' Rights Act, which enshrined 12-week waiting time guarantees. So for many of us, it's not surprising that we are here today listening to statistics of breached waiting times and the distress and suffering behind those statistics. So why do we have waiting time targets, and what do they mean for us as decision makers? For government, and indeed our communities, waiting time targets signal that healthcare is being monitored, governance is in place, and patients' rights are being protected. As a nurse, operational and strategic manager in the NHS for over 25 years, I witnessed the impact that government targets and guarantees have on our care systems. The operational imperative of not breaching a target, driving decision-making and leading to some of the scandals that we've seen over the years. Waiting time targets are not clinically led. If you're in pain or suffering with acute mental health problems, being told you will be treated within 12 weeks feels like a lifetime. But then to discover the information you receive is not accurate and your expectations will not be met can be devastating, both to your physical and mental well-being. Patients want to be given accurate, timely information. Health and community care is a complex system whose efficiency is dependent on all its interrelated parts. Waiting lists and waiting times are affected by each part of the system and by the links between them. There is, of course, a place for short-term approaches to tackle delays, but they need to be part of a wider strategy that looks at the whole system for achieving a sustainable reduction in waiting times. At around £12.9 billion, our NHS spending accounts for 43% of the overall Scottish Government budget, whilst rising operating costs have meant that health boards have had to make unprecedented savings of almost £390 million just to break even. In October 2017, Audit Scotland concluded that simply adding more funding was no longer sufficient to achieve the step change needed across the system. Now, we in this chamber can trade insults, cast aspersions of blame, and try to outdo each other on who is most virtuous, but the reality is that this will not address the real problems that our NHS faces. So in conclusion, I would say this. Do I blame the SNP and their government for the failure to meet waiting times? No, I don't. They don't control patient demand, or indeed many of the bottlenecks and realities in individual areas that impact on waiting times. But do I hold the SNP and their government responsible for their failure to meet waiting times? Absolutely. They introduced the Patients' Rights Act, they established the measures, they took responsibility, and they would, after all, want the credit if it was achieved. So yes, of course they are responsible when these promises are broken, and that's the bottom line in this debate. Thank you.